Hello. So, Oxbridge are both quite famous for their hypocrisy. And we know it's always going to be like that. There are shades in between, but there are two types of professor in the college. One type is the sort who just wants to keep his or her head down and do the research. And the other type are the administrators. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, they're not particularly good at what they do. They're pretty good, but nothing astonishing. You don't get fireworks coming out of the master of the college. You very often find people who have been fireworks and then they get, made master when they start running dry, basically, or maybe it's the running the college that does run them dry. I don't know. But the point is, you simply cannot be an administrator and a good researcher, generally speaking. There are some who can, but very, very few. So the sort of people who are running the colleges are manoeuvrers in general. They're good at manoeuvring. They're not writing the papers. They're not doing the research. And I am going to be talking about Professor Gopal soon, but I do want to start off by talking about Baroness Morgan of Hyton, who is the master of Fitzwilliam College and wrote a letter to Dr. David Starkey saying they'd agreed to sever their relationship. Here we are. Although Dr. Starkey holds no teaching role at Fitzwilliam, honorary fellows have the same responsibility as all members of our college to uphold our values. And I did what I didn't mention about Baroness Morgan was this. This article here from the Telegraph is from 2009. Yeah, that's right. Lord's expenses, it says. Sally Morgan claimed 40,000 for London home. Sally Morgan, the former aide to Tony Blair, claimed £40,000 in expenses for her 1.1 million London house by telling Parliament that her weekend country retreat was her main home. I shall explain to those of you who don't know about the British political system. When they go to the House of Lords, they might be coming from Northamptonshire. They might live in Cumbria, a long way away, and they have to go into London. They can't just do it for a day. So they have to have a pied-à-terre in London, somewhere they can stay while they're attending meetings in Parliament. And what Sally Morgan did was she claimed that her country retreat was her home, which meant that when she attended meetings in London, she could claim train fares, petrol allowance, even accommodation allowance. I don't know quite what she certainly she would have claimed for travel. But she might have also claimed for the mortgage or the rent on the home in London, which she had to have because she was travelling from wherever her country retreat was. Yeah, it says here, Baroness Morgan tells officials she stays at the house in Wandsworth for the purpose of attending sittings of the House. She's paid £135,000 a year for jobs outside politics, consultancies, and says her main home is a house in Hampshire, which is an hour out of central London by train. And so she claimed £38,370 since 2005 for running the London townhouse, you know, heating, that sort of thing. And, oh, not that motorbike again. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm cutting that out. There's still quite a bit of noise, but it's a bit less now. At least I can hear myself think. So here we are. She's claimed 38,370 since 2005. This was up to 2009 for running the semi-detached London townhouse. You know, running expenses on her pied-à-terre. Peers whose main residence can claim £174 a night to pay for a second home or a hotel room in the capital. No need for receipts because they're supposed to be honourable people. So they just say, that's how much it costs me. And then it's paid out. Who cares? After all, it's only people like me who are paying for it. It's not their money. Yet, Lady Morgan has repeatedly stated in official company documents, you know, like her business, outside politics, that the London property is her usual residential address. She shares it with her husband, who works full-time in London as a barrister. One of the couple's two sons lived with them while attending private school in London until last year, where he started at Oxford University. Yesterday, decorators working at the couple's Hampshire house said they knew they were working for Mr. Lyons, but had not met him. That's because he'd never turned up. Okay, Lord's rules state members whose main residence is within Greater London cannot claim night subsistence. And that's what she was doing. But this is a woman who talks about Cambridge values. And it seems to me that what she's more concerned about is property values. All right, well, that's Baroness Morgan, who wrote to David Starkey about upholding values. Now, let's get on to Professor Gopal. I did mention to a couple of people that I had done some research into Professor Gopal while I was preparing my previous video. I was doing this for a reason, because Gopal is now famous for tweeting "White lives don't matter." And, you know, it could have been a joke. It could have been taken out of context. It could have been something she said in a fury and then sent another saying, you know, this wasn't right or something. So I wanted to make sure that that is really what she'd said. And that was part of her general attitude. And so I looked to her Twitter account and discovered it was restricted. After that White Lives Don't Matter business, there was a bit of a Twitter storm, and Twitter revoked her, or suspended her account. And then a whole lot of her supporters made a fuss, and her account was put back. But she restricted it, which means only people she designates friends can access it. I don't know what she thought, because you see, the internet is forever. And somebody like me who has the time and the inclination can always find an archive, which I did. I shall leave a link to the archive in the description, if I remember. But I found a lot of her tweets, and I'll just put the rolling screenshot of the pages. 400 of them I found. There might have been more. But before I do that, before I go into the one or two that I did access, because you could go mad accessing all of those, I wanted to say something about her name, which sort of interested me. I looked at her, well, the first thing I did was look at her Wikipedia biography, and I found this. Early life. Gopal was born in Delhi, India, the daughter of an Indian diplomat, it says here. She spent her childhood in India, Sri Lanka and Bhutan. which means she must have gone, you know, with her family. They were posted to India, Sri Lanka and Bhutan, and she attended an international high school in Vienna, necessarily, where her father served as a diplomat in the mid-1980s. So her father was a quite high-powered diplomat, but they don't give his name here, and that did surprise me. So I looked up Gopal and India, Sri Lanka and Bhutan and Vienna. I couldn't find him. And then I thought, well, let's try something else. Let's look up the meaning of the name Gopal. And I discovered it's not a family name, usually. There are many people with the first name Gopal. But if you look down this whole list, the only people with the surname Gopal are down here. It's not commonly used as a surname. And according to, there's, one of those We Find Your Ancestry websites, it said Gopal is not used at all as a second name in India, although some Indians have adopted it in America for some reason. My suspicion is because the second name causes them so much trouble. And Gopal is quite easy to spell and to say, and most Americans would get that, whereas one of the longer Indian names would take a long time. I mean, that's just a theory. Gopal is not a common Indian family name, and she was born in New Delhi. So my suspicion is Gopal isn't her real name. It's one she's adopted. I mean, it might be her real legal name now, but that's not the name of her family. Anand Gopal, an American journalist, Antonio Gopal, Seychelles hurdler, a director, a biologist, an actor, a physicist, a chess player, an Indian politician, I looked him up, a social worker, a Nepalese singer, a historian, a writer and historian, a dancer, volleyball player, and an American politician. So this is all very strange. Gopal name meaning Indian, southern states, Hindu name, and used as a surname among South Indians in the United States. So there's something a little odd about Professor Gopal, and the first thing is that's probably not her name. That's the first thing about Professor Gopal. And the second thing is, in my opinion, she is actually disturbed. That's the opinion I've got from the tweets she sent. So I'll just give you a few examples, apart from the ones that are more famous. I hasten to add, some of my best friends are white men. In fact, all of my exes. Maybe that's why she has a down on white people. When you invite, somebody made a comment during one of my, underneath one of my videos, saying something to the effect that there was a rabbinical saying that if you want to find dog poo in paradise, you're going to find it. And that's her attitude here. Oh, just another day, just another old white man weeping hot tears of outrage. Forcing BAME MPs to go to physically vote when their higher risk of contracting illness and dying is, well, you know, a bit racist. I mean, older, any sort of man is at a risk, higher risk. You know, she's just looking. What does she think? That the British government's trying to kill people of colour? I mean, hang on. It doesn't have to be BAME. It's anybody who's got diabetes or heart trouble. Just take a look at half the MPs. Most of them aren't in very good physical condition. Most of them are, over 50. And, it's just finding one thing. What's the next thing? This is after the referendum. I would leave two. I think she means two there. I would leave too, but where would I go? India? USA? Like, these are impossible. We need to be real about the fact that the world is going this way. Britain is just a piddling little footnote. You know, anyone who has that sort of disrespect for the country she's living in, she shouldn't be there. Why is she living in this piddling little footnote? Why did she accept a professorship? But whatever. India and the USA, they're even worse. And this is what I said in a previous video. She's the sort of person who carries nastiness and hatred around with her. It's in her heart. She could go anywhere and she'd find it bad because it's there. And whiteness lives in her brain. You cannot mentor institutional white supremacy into extinction. That word, white supremacy, I think, you know, it's sort of burned into her inside of her skull. What you're being asked to do is save white people from bloopers that might get them into hot water and unwelcome media attention. This is how she sees white people, and definitely it's not people, it's white people. She's got this thing about white people. When centrist middle-class white women praise difficult women, they emphatically do not mean women of colour or black women who might be difficult. Why did the white Western female athletes who feel hard done by trans athletes because of unfair advantage never wonder how come they didn't meet African or Asian athletes at tennis finals for the most part? Did you know that's total nonsense? That is total nonsense. Maybe African or Asian, maybe at least Africans might not play tennis as frequently or be encouraged to play tennis like people in Europe. I mean, you know, it's total nonsense. And I think the Williams sisters might have something to say about at least lineage. Well, I don't think the last, there was a Wimbledon thing. Yeah, she Japanese or Chinese woman? A kid, really. She was a very young woman. Just beat everybody in sight. So what's she talking about here? Well, nothing except her own prejudice. And there's a good deal of difference. What's she saying here? That white female athletes have an unfair advantage. In what way? You try and find a white female athlete who's as good as most African female runners, for instance, because running is probably more encouraged in African sports than tennis, that's all. Let's see. Oh, here's an example of her fair-mindedness. Muslims spreading corona. Let's have a look at this. So somebody said something and, oh, not as funny as you though, love, with your fancying yourself progressive. Although for a white American, you probably are, since racism and white supremacy run deep in your culture. Like it doesn't run deep in Indian culture. They are the culture that invented the caste system. And back to Gopal's name, I wonder what caste she is. I'm assuming it's probably a pretty high one, and that's why she's trying to hide it. I resist urges to kneecap. We've done that one. A routinely racist move in white institutions is to turn the demand to be treated equally into toxic entitlement. I'll give you toxic entitlement. There's and this is why you may say, do you have a down on Professor Gopal? Well, the reason I do have a down on her is because of what happened in King's College. Professor Gopal was supposed to be tutoring students in King's College. And when she went in there, she was not a teacher in King's College. Apparently they asked her to use another entrance because it was a closed day. And they didn't call her Dr. Gopal, they called her Madam, and she insists that was racism. The University of Cambridge have hit back at an outspoken academic who branded all white porters racist for calling her Madam instead of Doctor, which she says was because she isn't white. Well, I want to tell you something about Cambridge. I've met some really nice professors there. I've met some real stinkers. They're the ones who usually, as I said earlier on, they're the ones who do the manoeuvring. And they can be, truly nasty, and they can create a very nasty atmosphere, just like this woman can. But the college servants, the bedders, the porters, I have never known one who wasn't unfailingly polite. And I won't have anything said. They deal about these guys. They deal with students who have all sorts of problems, all sorts of attitudes, who think it's really clever to be snooty, who think since they got into Cambridge, they can treat other, non-graduates, any way they want. Truly, the college porters and the bedders, they take so much. And they're not paid all that well. And they are unfailingly polite. And anyone who has a go at them, accusing them of racism, I'm going to feel like, they are just about the worst punchers down that I have ever seen. Priyamvada Gopal said earlier today that she will no longer supervise students from King's College because of a consistently racist profiling and aggression by porters. King's College say there was no wrongdoing from its staff, and I might not believe them about some of their professors, but I do believe them about the staff. Every visitor was asked to show their card during the course of that day, as the college was closed to everyone except King's members. Non-members such as Dr. Gopal were asked to take alternative routes around the college. This was a matter of procedure, not discrimination. And then they came out with the mantra. King's College is a rich and diverse community. Take the well-being of its students and staff extremely seriously. We remain committed to being an inclusive and welcoming environment in which to work and study. We categorically deny that the incident referred to was in any way racist. King's College head porter launched into a tirade about people treat him. Yeah, I'm sure she was treating him terribly. I'm sorry, but my brown body isn't taking the hit for that. He'd never talk like this to an actual white man who behaves badly. Well, how does she know? You'd be surprised at the numbers of letters I get from white men insisting they have the right to have me explain things to them. Well, I don't know what that guy said, but maybe he did want an explanation. I grew up with Raj dramas like Jewel in the Crown, The Far Pavilions, and A Passage to India. And then she says, I also grew up with The Far Pavilions. I still dream of a white man with a tan who looks like an Afghan and is called Ash. Then again, maybe I stopped. We've got a little problem here, haven't we, Professor Gopal? A sort of unfulfilled lust after white men by the looks of things. Finally, a PS to all academics, particularly White and Oxbridge. Please stop embarrassing yourself with tweets or observations like I'm not privileged. How privileged do you have to be to let that issue from your lips without a filter? And then somebody put this poster here. People, lovely old Cambridge, where we don't discuss vulgar things like race. Well, you're not discussing it, are you, Professor Gopal? You're just throwing out insults. Somebody might have done that as a wind-up. I think that's more likely, especially in a student town. And why didn't she just laugh it off? Because you can do that too. No, she has to make a dig about white people. And then 2 things I'm working on during lockdown: becoming sweet-tempered and learning to do splits. Well, listen, love, we could have lockdown till the end of the next century and you would not learn how to be sweet-tempered. Why don't you treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of promotional merchandising? The Grannyopteryx t-shirt or the Granbo mug, which comes in 2 flavours, with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. And whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.